we've got the AR-10 up here on the tripod. We've got our loophole Mark V 3 to 18, 3.6 to 18. We've got our mount, we've got our tools, and we've got a way of leveling this. All right, so starting out, we're just gonna go ahead and throw the mount up here. Just to have a solid base. So since we don't have like a Badger leveling kit or anything like that out here, we're just gonna go ahead and mount this to the gun. And we're just gonna pick a random spot right here that looks close enough.
Now with these, like just like all other types of mounts, just hand, just cranking them down, you don't need to worry about.
So for now, I'm just gonna tighten them kind of hand tight, just so we can level the scope. So, and then once we get the scope leveled in here and have that everything established, then we'll actually properly torque them down.
Okay.
There are gonna be torque specs for every bolt or screw on these mounts. So we'll take these out.
Now when you're doing this, hand tools only, don't use
I've
power
never
tools.
used power tools, no. I'm sure you could for loosening, but you always run into the possibility of stripping out the heads.
Yeah.
So it's always best to just use hand tools. I will say the fix-it sticks are probably the most user-friendly tools to use. They've gotten pretty popular over the past couple years.
It's almost like, why did it take so long for somebody to come up with this?
You guys see this ring down here inside of the scope mount itself. What that's usually for is some people like to put a form of glue or resin in here to help the scope stay put. And that line right there is just kind of like a way for the glue to kind of stick into something. That way it doesn't slide around or anything like that. We're not going to do that today, but that is an option that some people like to do. Now that we've removed the top rings, we're going to grab our scope. We're going to set it in there. And we'll just try to have about even space, give or take. All right, so obviously you have a lot of room. You can slide this far forward as forward or as back forward as you want. Just gonna kind of set it right there in the middle. We'll take these. These do have the loophole symbol on them, so just be cognizant when you're putting those on as far as which direction you want them to face, or if you just don't care if they're facing both different ways. They'll mount either way, but as far as aesthetic purposes go, it's something you need to pay attention to. Certain mounts will have like the option to mount like a red dot or a diving board or something like that. So you want to make sure that you're mounting those in the correct spots if your mount has that.
Oh, you mean kind of almost like doing like what we did early on in the days, like with the.
Yep.
With
so
the
you have like a red dot up here, or it'll have like a diving board for any type of like IR illuminator or rangefinder device. And obviously if you mount that back here in the back, it's not going to work. So when you're tightening these star pattern, and you're wanting this gap here to be about the same as the gap over here. All right, right now we're just gonna kind of tighten these a little bit, enough to where it's clamping onto the scope, and then we're gonna level the scope before we fully torque these down. All right, so we've got two ways of leveling a scope here that we're gonna demonstrate today. There's multiple ways that you can do it. One of the fastest and easiest ways, and most people use, is gonna be just utilizing levels. This one happens to be from fix-it sticks. So this one you will mount directly to your rifle via the Picatinny mount, and this other one you will set directly on top of your turret on your scope. As long as that turret is nice and flat, which most scopes have a flat top on their turret, that's where you're going to want to put this. You don't want to set it on your mount because your mount's really not changing. And again, you're not leveling the mount, you're leveling the scope. All right. Ideally, you want to mount this to the receiver, so we're going to mount it back here. Because again, if this rail here is off in any way, shape, or form, that's going to mess up the level that you're trying to get. So this one looks pretty aligned, but there is slight difference here. Like I can feel there's a ridge with my finger. So that rail is not going to be trued up to this receiver that your scope is going to be sitting on. So we're just going to mount this back here. All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to level the gun. So we've got that gun level. A lot of tripods will have a level here as well. This one's not quite matching up with that one, but we're going to go off this one because it is with the receiver. All right, and we'll take this one, and we're just going to set that on top.
So we want to adjust the...
No, this is fine. Now, as you can see, the scope is definitely very crooked, so all we'll do is turn this. And we wanted that bubble to be right in the center, just like it is with this one. All right. And from there, again, in a star pattern, we'll just start tightening these down. We'll just get them hand tight for now to where the scope is not moving. We've got these tight enough to where essentially I'm meeting resistance, so I don't want to crank down on those because I want to make sure these are properly torqued. So per Leopold, the 28 inch-pounds is the proper torque specs for these top screws. What I like to do personally, I won't start out going 28 on every single one. I'll go to about 10 to 12 on every single one, and then I'll go back and do the full torque amount for each one. So again, doing that star pattern. All right, so I've got it at 15 inch-pounds now, and I'm gonna go and do the full 28. 28's a little on the higher end. Most scope mounts are gonna be around that 15 to 20. So just make sure you check your manual for whatever mount that you have. All right, that one's good. I'm just gonna do the exact same thing on this end, and then we'll be all set.
So I have mounted a couple optics on some of my AR platforms, and I can tell you what I did not do was read the instructions.
Obviously want to torque these down properly for multiple reasons. One being make sure the scope does not move, right, every time I shoot. And two, you don't want to over tighten those screws. One, you can strip those screws out, or two, you can actually cause damage to that scope tube. If you've got too much pressure on that tube, you can see some issues with it actually crushing the tube, which is not what you want.
Do you think that this might be a little bit higher because this one is 308? Like, you think it would be the same specs for a 5.56?
Yeah, it would be the exact same.
It'd be
So
the same,
it's
okay.
per the mount. It doesn't really matter what gun is
The
going
caliber,
on
okay.
specifically. Yeah. All right, so now the scope is level. All we need to do is make sure that the scope is where we want it on the gun as far as mounting, as far as proper eye relief goes. So what I would like you to do is if you can get behind this gun.
All right.
If you need to adjust the stock, adjust this cheek piece, and then figure out your eye relief. So again, proper eye relief, we can establish that by making sure we have no scope shadow, right? So when we're looking through the optic, especially on higher magnification, so we typically want to do this on the highest, which would be 18 for this optic, all right? That way we can limit the amount of scope shadow that we have. So we want it to be a perfect ring with no black around the edges. Again, if you need to move that stock, you need to adjust that cheek piece, you can do that. Again, to where you're feeling comfortable, all right? If we need to slide the scope forward or backwards, we can do that.
Yeah, I got no scope shadow. I got a clean ring around the outside. I can see all of it.
All right, you feel comfortable?
Yeah.
All right, we'll call that good then, so we don't really need to move it. However, we do need to properly mount it and torque it down. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm actually gonna loosen this again. Now, you notice that now this is loose, right? You can see how there's a little bit of play right here in the mount, so forward and backwards. Whenever you're mounting an optic to your gun, whenever you put it on that Picatinny rail, you wanna push forward, keep that forward pressure, and then tighten these bolts down.
Get that hand tighten. Okay.
Yeah, if you think about it like if you're in a car accident, right? So like car hits a wall, you being inside the car, which direction do you go?
You're going
you go forward, right? Your scope is you in the car during the car accident. So that recoil impulse from that weapon system is gonna go back. The scope being on top is gonna wanna go forward. So you're pushing it as far forward up against that Picatinny as possible. That way it has no room to move. Because if this thing shifts during that recoil process, over time you're gonna see a shift in your zero. All right, and we are good to go with this gun right here.
Nice.
As of now, we're setting it up for us as is.
Yeah.
We'll zero it, and then from there we can go into considerations for the mask.
All right.